Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have a great show for you today. There's a new Ferrari SUV, crossover, soft roader. What exactly is it? Looks pretty good, and it has a V12, and we're going to talk about it. Some news about the potential future of the Dodge Challenger and Charger. Not confirmed, but we're seeing something that suggests that it may move to a different factory, and what that actually might mean for its product future, how it might be based, what the car might look like. We'll see, but it's something to talk about. We have been driving a lot of interesting things, some very interesting SUVs. Range Rover Sport in Madrid for Byron, the GTI SE, that's a fun one. And I've been driving the Mercedes GLE and the BMW X3M competition. We will spend your money, of course. It's a good one. So, with that, I'll bring in Associate Editor Byron Hurd. How are you, man?
Doing pretty well. Looking forward to what looks like the end of hot weather today with this system that's moving through. It's going to be fall in Michigan, and that's always a good thing.
Should we make it like a limited run day, stick like a V8 in it, maybe some interesting packages, like Dodge is doing? I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, can't be last call. It could be, last fall is a bit easy.
There you go.
And also,
last
it doesn't
fall.
really sound right, but okay.
Oh boy. But yeah, it's going to be nice. I'm looking forward to it. It's that time of year right when the season starts to tip, and it would be right on schedule because we're recording this on Wednesday. Fall starts tomorrow on Thursday. We should probably talk about fall beers here at the end of the show. But the Ferrari Purosangue, I guess, is the way to pronounce it, I think. I've heard it a number of different ways, probably most of them incorrect, but a beautiful melodic name for, I think it's a pretty handsome crossover. It reminds me a little bit of when they rolled out the Ferrari California, probably 12, 13, 14 years ago now. And it was a little bit of a different, car for what they were building at that time. Thus, the styling was a little bit different. And I think those ethos are also reflected in this, in this crossover. Little bit surprised that, they are sticking with the V12. I mean, good on them. I think that's great. Ferrari is always going to probably sort of march to their own beat. But, to me, this also reminds me a little bit of the Ferrari FF too. It's sort of like a crossover, like hatch shooting brake sort of thing. It's not a Ford Explorer. When you say SUV, that's not what this is. It's not even really a Lamborghini Urus, I don't think. I think it definitely has more car-like proportions. But that's my initial impressions. What do you think of this thing?
I agree with you for the most part. I mean, I think sticking with the V12 is really what kind of saves this for me. Like it would have been going just a little too far if they'd done both a transition to a crossover kind of style and ditched the V12 entirely and said, "No, this is going to be a future-proof car. We're only going to do electrified. We're only going to do something, So I think the fact that they didn't try to do too much at once is what really saves it for me. And honestly, the more I look at it, the better it looks. Like my favorite Ferrari right now is the Roma, bar none. Like the Roma is just gorgeous. I love the classical lines. But looking at this, I see the Ferrari in it, which, I mean, it's Ferrari, so that's not surprising. But it hits in a way that I didn't really expect it to, especially like going in. I had no reason to want to like it. So, with the bar being set that low, it didn't take a whole lot to impress me. But yeah, I think I'm on board. Tentatively, cautiously, but I think I'm on board.
And they had to do this. I mean, I think literally everybody has done a crossover, from Rolls-Royce to Aston Martin, you name it. I don't think there's really any controversy at all when even a brand like Ferrari, which probably still views itself as a racing team, 16-time constructor champions that happens to make cars, I still think it's not even that controversial at this point. I mean, we just put it out there. It was just like another Ferrari reveal. There wasn't a lot of consternation. People weren't, like, the comments didn't light up. It kind of was what it was. I also think, a little bit of a hot take, it reminds me a little bit of a Kia EV6. If you look at the silhouette, which is a credit to both cars. Kia EV6 is a good-looking car. Crossover, I should say. And there's only so many ways you can sort of make your crossover look. So interior, the front part, straight out of central casting as far as a Ferrari sort of GT car. But hey, it's got a back seat, and it's actually a pretty good sized back seat too. So this is going to be a pretty usable thing for Ferrari owners who, want to, do weekend things with this. My guess is they'll sell as many as they can make. And yeah, I mean, it's, again, 715 horsepower. I mean, dry sub V12, like, okay, in 2022, you don't necessarily expect to hear that too much. So, I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. So that is the Ferrari Purosangue. Check it out. Get into the comments. Let us know what you think. Comments on this post itself. That sounds good. If you don't want to go all the way back to our story from a couple weeks ago, but definitely a landmark vehicle for Ferrari. Some news yesterday out of automotive news from just across the river. An analyst is sort of predicting that Stellantis is going to move the Dodge Charger and the Dodge Challenger from Brampton, Ontario to Windsor, Ontario. Now, what does this mean? Is the beer a little bit better in Windsor? Why are they doing this? It's a little closer to Detroit, Red Wings fans in Windsor, maybe Leafs fans in Brampton. I don't think any of that applies. The point appears to be, this analyst mentions, that it looks like Stellantis may be looking at using the former LX cars on the same chassis as a minivan. Now, don't get all up in arms. It sounds like it could be more like an EV situation, where it's just kind of a generic platform that's used for multiple vehicles. Platforms, especially in this day and age, are much more generic than they used to be, especially when talking about like the LX cars, which still ran that old Mercedes E-Class chassis until, well, they're still doing it as we speak. So this is definitely inside baseball. It's a little bit to unpack, but I think it offers a little bit of a preview about where we could see, these muscle cars going and what shape they may take. Because right now we don't know. We don't even actually know for sure if they're going to do a Charger and a Challenger after the current generation goes out. They've been very tight-lipped about it. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what do you think this means, Byron?
Well, I think it's probably a good sign that they're even talking about it. Like, just the fact that it looks like there is a future is good news. And also, I mean, we say it could be, a minivan chassis. Like you said, modern platforms being what they are, that's a pretty meaningless thing. But the beauty of it is, like, if they are moving toward a chassis that could be shared with minivans, that probably means we're talking about a mid-size car at biggest, rather than a kind of in between mid and full size car that's sort of been shrunk down from a full-size European car, but upsized from a mid-size American car into kind of some Frankenstein thing that doesn't really make a ton of sense as a coupe. So I think it's good news pretty much all around. And having owned a Challenger, I would love to see them do another one. I would love to see another generation of these cars. I mean, it's all my kind of bluster about the demise of the Hemi. Despite that, I actually like these cars. I enjoyed driving my Challenger. I didn't sell it because I didn't like it. I just sold it because I wasn't driving it. So it's one of those situations where anything that indicates that there's a future for them is good, especially given what's happening to a lot of other sports cars and other enthusiast models at this point. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I guess that's the theme of the day. I'm cautiously optimistic about Ferrari SUVs and Windsor-based muscle cars.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And just to be very specific here, it's Sam Fiorani, who's the VP of Global Forecasting for a local sort of analytics firm, Auto Forecast Solutions. That's what I was looking for. He tells Automotive News Canada. So that's the story. Check it out. Like you, I still do own a Charger, and I kind of do need to sell it because, like you, I don't drive it anymore. It's not that I don't like it. I just don't feel like getting all the recalls fixed and, slapping some new tires on it. It's like, I probably get it done in 2 days. And I really should, but where does anybody find 2 days in their life at this point, right? So like you, I'm just intrigued. Every little sort of kernel of news about what might come next for these cars, I'm very interested in. And again, we're kind of grasping at straws and tea leaves here because we don't really know. This is like what one guy is telling a Canadian version of Automotive News. But I mean, they're also usually right. They tend to know where, like, manufacturing, like, footprints tend to go. So, and I also, to your point, the Charger and Challenger are big vehicles. A minivan-like vehicle is also going to be a big vehicle. So, I mean, to me, that seems like they're sort of staying the course. And if there is some level of electrification, all that could mean is that it'll be like all-wheel drive or something like that. It's hard to say about the rear-wheel drive portion of it. I don't see the minivan being rear-wheel drive. But, I mean, with electrification, though, sometimes they can they can send the power almost any direction they want. So these could still be rear-wheel drive. And we'll see. I'm sure it'll look like a Charger when the time comes and the Challenger when the time comes.
Yeah, and with this new inline six architecture too, I mean, they have plug-in options on the table. So you figure they could start with just a Turbo 6 as a base engine and then work up from there, sandwich in an electric motor the way they do in the 4xe powertrain for Jeep. And suddenly you've got more power, more torque, and electric range built into a vehicle that didn't have it before. So the new system gives them a lot more flexibility. It's much more modular. So even in a situation where, it's not a pure EV, they don't have to go, you don't need to have all-wheel drive. You don't need to, add all that weight if you don't want to. It's just the batteries you have to worry about. So a lot of options there. And the fact that it's so flexible, I think, really just opens up doors for enthusiast models that otherwise may not get the chance to shine, because it's just, it used to be a lot more expensive to knock out a bespoke chassis just for a sports car. Now you can, take something you've got for something else and just shrink it appropriately and you're good to go. So I'm not going to say the same two words again, but I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're a Mopar enthusiast, an LX enthusiast, like I think you're going to want to stick around and see how this all shakes out. Yes, maybe try and snap up one of these last call, or I don't know, that 300C really was speaking to me last week at the auto show.
Same.
So, but I mean, the future might be okay. So let's talk about what we've been driving. You went to Madrid and the area surrounding it to drive the brand new Range Rover Sport, correct?
Yes.
All right. I always mix up Sport versus regular Range Rover, which is ironic considering I was the one who sent you the email and made the assignment and then forget what it was. But yeah, I mean, what is it? Does it live up to, your notions of what this should be? How was Spain? What did you eat? Did you get some olives? How the hell was it?
Man, well, I mean, the location was spectacular. We were told by people who go there more frequently. I mean, I've never been there. It was actually, Spain was the reason I had a passport as a teenager. I was supposed to go on a school trip there in college. The trip fell through. I never went. So now this became my first trip to Spain. Yeah, we actually, one leg of the trip on our second day of driving, as we were coming into our little rest stop, they were actually just had olive trees along the side of the road that were actually fruiting and ripe. So you could just pull up and stick your hand out the window and pick olives right off the tree and just throw them in your cup holder and cruise on down the road. And there were people in our convoy who were doing exactly that, much to the consternation of some of the locals who didn't think anyone should be driving on that road at all, because Europe has very different attitudes towards cars, and especially large ones, than we do. Which was probably the real salient point for the whole trip, was just, a Range Rover Sport is based on the same chassis as a Range Rover has been for a while now. It's the 5-passenger version of the Range Rover. So it's quote unquote the smaller one, but just means it's not the 3-row. There's nothing unique about the chassis or anything like that. It's the less expensive, the slightly less ostentatious, but also kind of flashier in a way version of the Range Rover. And yeah, I mean, obviously it definitely lives up to the hype. I mean, especially in a place where big cars, big trucks just don't exist. I mean, apart from the Range Rovers, the largest vehicles we saw were basically Toyota RAV4s and Hyundai Tucsons and stuff like that. It was really strange for us as Americans being there driving and being in these cars that we would consider to be kind of like mid-size SUVs, and being seen by everyone on the road there as this just ridiculous show of wealth and just oversized ostentation, which to me, to us, you pull this thing up next to a Ford F-150 and it's 2/3 the size. Like it's a completely different world driving over there. And it kind of played to our strengths a little bit because we were comfortable driving such large vehicles, and people would see us coming and think they had to get out of the way. And it's just like, no, we got this. We're fine. Just stay where you are. We can cruise right by you. But it was a very different experience. And one I enjoyed a great deal. I had obviously wanted to go to Spain for many, many years. It was nice to finally get the chance. And doing it in a Range Rover is a pretty fantastic way to do it. Especially, I mean, people treated us like celebrities, good and bad. Like there were some gestures that were thrown at us just for existing. And I won't even try to articulate what they were because there's just no clean way to do it. But, it was, people were taking pictures of us, like they just made a scene, even though, we're looking at each other like, we're nobody. We're here doing this on somebody else's dime. But everyone, was treating us like rock stars. And it's strange, like even around here, living in the western Detroit suburbs, a Range Rover just kind of, I won't say it blends in, but it doesn't make a splash. I mean, it's just one of many expensive SUVs. We're surrounded by Escalades and, you name it. And, around here, yeah, okay, that's a Range Rover. Cool. It's the new one. Nice. Over there, it's like, oh my God, they're 7 people in a row rolling in here in Range Rovers. It must be a football team. Like, what's going on? So get out your cameras. Let's see what's happening. But it was quite an experience. The Range Rover absolutely, it lives up to the hype. I mean, you're getting the peak of luxury and just enough capability to know that, like, yeah, you can basically do what a Jeep Grand Cherokee can do, but you don't have to be in such a lowly vehicle, that kind of attitude. But certainly not for me personally, but I get the appeal. It's a heck of a car.
Yeah, I get the appeal. It's always been one I have, I like that it's different from the Germans. It's a different attitude. It's a different vibe. And I've always liked that. I drove the Range Rover, like the bigger one, extensively earlier this summer. This summer, we have like 18 hours of it left, but and I liked it. It had that sort of champagne, like metallic finish. So I think they're on the right track with these sort of the final days of these big, powerful SUVs before, like, Range Rover does have a long-term electrification plan. I think in their case, it's a little more long-term than, some of the other companies that are like, we're going to be electric and by 2025. Range Rover is like, well, we'll see in the 30s or something like that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll have an electric by 2025,
right.
But we're not going to be electric by 2025.
Right.
Let's not get crazy. Yeah. And the timing of the trip turned out to be kind of unfortunate in a way because the day we landed in Spain was the day that the Queen died.
Yeah.
And of course, Land Rover and Range Rover has a very long and close relationship with the royal family. So our day of driving would usually start with like a tech briefing and, all this rah-rah brand stuff. And instead they read a statement. Everyone on the team was dressed in black. And they said, okay, we're going to take you out to your cars now. And you just kind of figure it out as you go. And we'll ask you not to share anything on social media or, be too flashy about it. I mean, we walked out and got into a bright red V8 powered Range Rover Sport First Edition that costs $135,000, but we did it very sedately. It was unexpected. Of course, I mean, we all knew that she was in poor health, and it's not like, it was a surprise at that point. They'd been saying for days that the end was coming. But, for me being a filthy, unwashed American, it never occurred to me that was going to have an impact on that program when of course it would, because this is a family who reaches out to Land Rover to have their funeral procession vehicles custom designed. It's not just like, oh yeah, we use them because they have the right badge. Like they have a genuinely close relationship with the royal family. So it was a big deal.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting moment, I guess, where history sort of interjects with your life. And I mean, if anything, the last few years have taught us is these are different times than just say the 90s or the 70s or something. It's, I don't know, pick a moment in the last few years and something has happened, it seems like, on some scale. But yeah, any other thoughts about the car? What did you think of the interior? I think like I said, I drove the regular Range Rover. My guess is this is about the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's fabulous. I mean, you figure it's quote unquote the cheap one because the base model's 20 grand cheaper and it comes with a less impressive engine. But of course, you still have the autobiographies and all the other loaded up models. That sound system is fantastic, and it's something that you appreciate even more, especially now that one of the models we were driving was a plug-in hybrid, and it was frequently in battery electric mode because when you're in the inner city areas in Europe, most of them ban internal combustion. So you have to at least have a hybrid that can operate as an EV for brief periods of time, or a full-blown battery electric to even be allowed to drive in certain sections. And so the car, the navigation system could even talk to the powertrain and say, okay, you need to conserve this much battery power in order to reach your destination within the city without using the gas engine. And when you're cruising around at 25, 35 kilometers an hour, you're not going very fast. In a city, in an electric car, the car is not masking any of its own noises. It's not doing a good job of keeping the world out because there's no engine noise. So they had to engineer all of that back into the chassis. They have to do all of the noise control with the chassis instead of trying to use the engine to kind of smooth some of that out and get rid of some of the unwanted vibrations and harmonics. So it was impressive that they did such a good job. And then on top of that, just being able to fire up that 3D sound system and kind of put the entire world another 50 feet farther away from you. It's very plush. We'll put it that way.
Sounds good. I like you, Spain was on my bucket list. I was fortunate to make it there about 6 years ago. Wow, has it been 6 years? That's crazy. And I drove the Audi TTRS. We were in Spain, and then we took it to the Urama, the track nearby, which was very cool, really cool track. Ate dinner at about 10:30 at night, which was kind of wild, as you would expect. Yeah, it was memorable, definitely memorable. Really glad to get to Spain.
Yeah. Oh man, and the food there was just fantastic. I mean, you can get tapas anywhere, but they know a thing or two about it. And the beauty of it is like, again, as an American, you go someplace like that where they have very different ideas of what constitutes a portion. And the fact that they just keep feeding you completely makes up for it because, I was like, oh my God, like I've eaten more in the past 24 hours than it feels like I've eaten in a week. And this is supposed to be light, And of course, our meal on the final night was the family style paella. So we had, the seafood paella, and then like the farmer paella and the vegetarian paella, and just, going up and down the table, taking scoops of this, that, and the other thing. It was wonderful. I wouldn't trade that one for any of the other programs I've been on. I think that one now tops the list.
I will say this, when you there's tapas that you do here at like downtown restaurant, like, Detroit has a bunch of good places, New York, of course, the coasts. But then there's like go to Spain and have tapas, and it's like a different ball game. Like just the food is so good there. One thing I do remember, I didn't actually like what I ate. I had this like pork dish, and like as much as driving in like Urama and driving this 5-cylinder Audi, I still remember the waiter was like, "Yeah, the pork's not really our strength or something." And I was like, "Well, why didn't you tell me that, man? Like, that's not what." Like, okay. But I think it was one of those things where like they ordered for the table and it was just one of the courses. The red wine was outstanding, as you might imagine. And yeah, like you, driving in some of those small towns in the Spanish countryside, it gets a little hairy. With the TTRS, that's a like highly maneuverable car, a little bit easier than a Range Rover. But yeah, I mean, I was going through my old notes here in the story where I was like, flying out onto the A1 near Madrid. So it's a memorable place to drive. And, Europe is a challenging place to drive, I think, actually. Cool. Well, let's shift over. I have a couple of SUVs, so we'll just kind of intersperse them here. First one is the BMW X3M Competition. Very nice crossover. Got a lot of attention in my neighborhood. The weather is still nice, so a lot of the kids are sort of playing on the front lawns. Literally everybody's like, "So hey, what's up with that bimmer over there? That's pretty nice. What is that?" So definitely fits the bill as far as like trying to impress the neighbors, if that's what you're doing with your X3. X3M, the competition package, it's a $7,000 option. You can do that if you like. This one had, I believe the paint shade was like a glacier white. I may be wrong on that because it had this like gorgeous, like sky blue, grayish tint to it. Everybody was stopping and asking about the color. So, it definitely had some, gravitas to it, if you will. These had the, looks like it had the 21-inch black wheels, which were pretty cool. It started at about 73, and with some of the options, it got into the ballpark of about 80 grand. So, again, had some crossover. I think it's one of those things too where you kind of have to ask yourself, is this what you want? Do you want this much power? Do you want it to be in an X3? Do you want to be driving what's more powerful than many M cars, like Hall of Fame M cars, but it's also we used it to go get groceries and just run errands. So there was a lot of sort of cognitive dissonance going on for me with this thing. It's it's reasonably high off the ground, but it's a little bit lower because you're doing the competition thing. Super powerful, but it's also an X3. Just there was a lot going on there. And that's not really unique to BMW, although BMW and Mercedes are, and Audi to a certain extent, they're the ones who do these sort of fire-breathing SUVs. Not everybody does that. There is no Cadillac V series crossover or something, and the Aviator, for example, is an entirely different thing, even with the big engine in it. So these things are a little bit unique, but it's certainly a paradigm that's been around for a while. So it was a lot of fun. Try not to overthink it. The BMW steering was there. You know what I mean? That's just that kind of meaty feel with that steering wheel. It's a fun weekend. So I mean that's
nice.
That's the X3M competition. The market, I gotta think, is fairly niche because for this specific vehicle, because an X3, I mean, they'll sell those all day, but how many people need to throw on the competition pack and want to spend this much money at this price point? Because really, even for my relatively small family, X5 is the territory we'd want to be in. So, but the X3 is bigger than it's ever been. So yeah, I don't know. Have you driven any of the X3s lately?
Yeah, actually, I want to say it was also a competition, maybe last year, or the year before. And I when I drove it, I said almost everything that you just said to a friend of mine who commutes in an older, I want to say it's either a 325 or a 328iX all-wheel drive sedan. And he was talking about some builds he'd seen of people who were putting bigger turbos in the X3Ms and the power they were getting from it. I was like, I mean, but why would you spend all that money doing it in that car? And he said, well, to me, it makes perfect sense because I've got two kids who no longer have accessories that I need to carry along with us. So if the four of us want to go out for a fun drive somewhere, something like an X3M makes sense because it'd be kind of a splitting the difference between an M3 and I think he and his wife have a couple of Highlanders or something like that as their get around vehicles. So this way, you get an SUV, but it's fun. And I mean, it's never going to be me. It's just, I'm never going to be shopping that kind of compromise just because of the lifestyle choices I've made. But at the same time, I can kind of understand why, if you feel like you're kind of pigeonholed into a certain category, but you want to get that same feeling that you used to get from your fun cars, there's that balance there. But, I mean, it's BMW. They do the chassis very well. So it's in that car, it's sometimes hard to remember just how tall it really is. When you're really pushing it, it kind of starts to creep in around the periphery, but for the most part, it really does drive like a car. And I mean, same is true of the Stelvio Quadrifoglio and the C60 or GLC 63. Like you said, the Europeans know how to do this, and the ensuing package is usually pretty impressive. But again, I'm with you in that if I'm shopping for that kind of performance, I'm not shopping for that kind of car. And if I'm shopping for that kind of car, I'm probably not bothering with that kind of performance.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to say it. But I mean, just closing thoughts here with the competition package, you're looking at over 500 horsepower, 503 horsepower, which is kind of just mind boggling. That was like a high powered Mustang or Challenger 6-7 years ago. So, I mean, hey, if this is what you're looking for, it's there for you. I'm a big fan of wide variety in the automotive segment.
Yeah. And to your point earlier, I'm actually kind of surprised that Cadillac hasn't bothered with a smaller V crossover, like a legit option, like something, based on they've got Alpha, the platforms there. They might as well do something with it instead of just watch it die with these last two internal combustion models. But who knows?
It's funny too, not just to really go down this rabbit hole. If there is one company that doesn't do it, that could probably do it really well, it's Cadillac. Like they could definitely do a small to mid-size crossover with a Blackwing badge on it. And I think you could do some really good stuff. They have the chassis, they have the motor. I'm sure they could style the hell out of it and make it look pretty like it's supposed to look. So yeah, Cadillac guys, if you're listening, that might be a good idea. All right, let's shift gears back over to the GTI. This is a little more of a, on brand, on Autoblog type of vehicle. What did you do with this?
So I actually took this one on a road trip. I drove a manual one earlier in the year. It was an Autobahn, I believe. So it was as loaded as they get. I really enjoyed driving that and just hated interacting with the car. That was a big problem. And taking the SE, I took it on a road trip. Actually went down to Cleveland. A friend of mine had come out for a family wedding, and he was coming out from the East Coast. So I haven't seen him in almost a year and a half. So I was like, yeah, we'll come down and meet you for lunch. So drove the GTI down, and honestly, as a vehicle to drive, it's wonderful, which is not surprising. The GTI has always been great. It's the jack of all trades, but that interior is such a pain to live with now. Like you don't even, this was an SE model, so it was the cheap end, the bare bones, and still everything is that goofy, like, touch sensitive interface and the unlit controls for all the different interior things, the things that you actually need to interact with are, if once the sun goes down, you can't even see them. It's just the little things that VW used to be so good at, they just left somewhere on the chopping block. None of it made it into this car. The chassis is wonderful. The manual transmission is wonderful. This one had the automatic. That's also wonderful. Everything that makes it a car is great. Everything that makes it a daily utility item you have to live with sucks. And it honestly, like, I don't say that about cars very often. Like, I'm very much in the there's an ass for every seat camp. But I was so mad after driving that car, that knowing that it could be pretty much perfect if they had just bothered with the interior. And 10 years ago, if you'd said that about Volkswagen, people would have stoned you to death, because that was just not, it was just unheard of for them to blow it that badly. So yeah, a frustrating car, honestly. But it's just wonderful to drive if you don't actually need it to cool you, heat you, answer your phone, do any of the other things that we take for granted in a car. Yeah, it's great. So, but that's just not what you buy a brand new car to do. So, if it's a track rat or something like that, you're buying something cheap. And if it's a pure enjoyment vessel, then you're buying an actual sports car. You're not buying a GTI. A GTI is too practical to be just a fun car. So I don't know what the point of it is anymore. I want to love it, and I just can't.
Wow. That is some very mixed emotions. I think it's interesting that you have more mixed emotions about the GTI than I did about the X3 M competition. And I was pretty all over the place on that too. Yeah, GTI is, I believe the GTI and the Golf R are the only two Golfs you can get. They don't sell like a basic like Golf anymore, which I get why they do it. I know we like how well Volkswagen makes their hatches, but the market is tiny. Just people in this country don't buy those cars. Like it's not what Americans want. So I get the business case. I drove one last summer, I want to say, earlier in the year. It was fun. I think it was actually a European model as I think about it. So, it was fun. Zach Palmer drove one on the track. They did some interesting things with the tires, if I recall. Like they put on some better tires than you would normally get. Let's put it that way, to improve the performance. So it's kind of an interesting year last year for Volkswagen, trying to pull some fast ones on a number of fronts. Volkswagen,
yes, we
anybody?
Remember those well.
Yeah, yeah, you've been a part of that.
That was. I'd rather forget about that.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was a disaster.
Yeah, good times, right? All All right, so I drove the Mercedes GLE. I actually don't have very many mixed emotions about this. I liked it. It was the 450. It was a big crossover, plenty of room for the family, the dog, the golf clubs, the T-ball equipment. Everything was fine. I'm starting to really warm up to the infotainment screen in the Mercedes, just Mercedes in general. This one I think is well proportioned. I don't have the exact number of inches, but it goes 2/3 across the dash, but it's not like a takeover cinematic screen. It's 2/3, 50%, that type of thing. Very easy to use. When I can sit in the car, open the sunroof, and scroll between the Tigers game, classic rock, sports talk, and my podcasts, I'm a happy cat. And to me, that's sort of like most they have in the center console. It just works. It's the opposite of say the Acura execution where you're trying to play Windows 95 and make your hand like a scroller type of thing. This just works. So, as far as doing all the family hauling duties and ease of use, good times. 450 comes with the 362 horsepower turbo inline 6. Yes, to me, that's exactly what I would want. It's very powerful. I can feel good about myself. It's an interesting engine, but it's not ridiculous. And it's a big SUV. So, if you're asking Golf Dad Greg what he thinks of it, then yeah, this is very well measured. It's a reasonable play. It's proportional response for, somebody who's looking for a car as they approach their middle ages, if you will, but you still feel good about it. It's impressive. It's a Mercedes SUV. It has presence. And also the sunroof thing, since we're diving into features here, the sunroof, God, it's not the air scarf because that's convertibles, but that feature that kind of pops up like a pop-up tent, gives you a little bit of lip to keep the wind from buffeting in. They have perfected that. Last week when I had this, it was a little hot. We were getting a little bit more of a preview of fall back then too. Absolutely perfect. A lot of times I'll open the sunroof and everybody in the car gets annoyed because the wind is whipping through you're, sailing off the coast of Cape May or something. With this, people didn't even notice it. It was outstanding. And I could get my sort of good circulation, and it was outstanding as far as that. So to me, this is definitely at or near the top of the segment as far as just, luxury SUVs of this size.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And honestly, it's so much better looking than the X6. Neither one of them is going to win anything for me on the styling front. But if I'm going to be seen driving either one of those, I want it to be the Mercedes.
Yeah.
And I drove, it was a 63S last,
oh, wow.
like a year ago, January, so almost 2 years ago. And that it was snowing. It was gross outside. And that thing, it's 603 horsepower, all-wheel drive, never put a foot wrong. You could do really dumb things in that car and not suffer consequences, which I guess is kind of what you're paying for in that situation. But yeah, that's a heck of a machine. And the AMGs sound so good, just so good. But yeah, the 450 is nice and sensible, which has that going for it.
Yeah, it's it's not cheap, but I think it's reasonably priced too as far as the GLE. It's in the $56,000, $57,000, $58,000 range. There's a lot of choices in that segment. Genesis GV80, the Cayenne, the X5, the X6 if you want the hatch type of thing. A couple of different Volvos if you want to go a little bigger with the XC90 or the XC60. It's just a very crowded field, if you will, as far as mid-size to large-ish SUVs.
I'm looking at the configurator for the AMG right now, and they have an emerald green metallic paint that looks really nice, especially with the red brake calipers.
Wow.
I'm suddenly more excited about this car. Not that I'm ever going to need one, but I can still lust after it from a distance.
Yeah, no, I've had a few forest emerald green test cars come through the fleet in the last, say, 6 months, and totally at random aside here. If you're looking for a car and you're not sure what color to get, and you can actually get said car and it's green, you might want to get it because you don't see too many of them on the road, and most of them look really good. I remember the Chevy Equinox green from a couple years ago was a gorgeous color. So, if you're looking to stand out, it's a little bit different.
And they seem to be rotating them through pretty quick. Like they'll introduce green for a model year or two. It'll sell about as well as green ever does, and then it disappears. So if you have a chance to buy a green car, you absolutely should.
Really, Alpina is the only one that seems to just like live and die with like a continuous, green paint. And that's one of their signatures too. So should we spend some money?
Yeah, let's try at least. This one's a doozy.
This is a doozy. All right. Matthew in Arizona writes, big fan of the podcast. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm looking for a jack of all trades car, it seems. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase this. Let's see. Matthew and his wife own a meal prep company in Arizona. 3 kids, 5, 3, and 1, and still car seats. So they basically are looking for something where what they want and what they need don't really correlate, to paraphrase him. They need to replace their 2002 Chevy Silverado that's worked well for our business because of the bed. Makes sense. The truck is still in decent shape, but it's over 2 decades old. Issues are starting to creep up. They don't want to wait until they're basically stuck on the side of the road with perishable food wilting away until, it's too late, essentially, and they should have upgraded sooner. Also, sounds like they're getting 13 miles to the gallon with this thing. So, hey, that's an issue. They need a vehicle that's large enough to hold the family, even though the wife's Sienna is the day-to-day family hauler and the road trip car. Also need it to have cargo space for the business. Think 3 150-quart coolers. Okay, that's a lot. That's a big cooler. Plus boxes for dry goods. Okay. So all of that stuff. He wishes he could get 2 cars, like a cargo van, like a Transit Connect, which is to me one of the obvious plays, or Ram ProMaster, but also wants this to be fun, like a manual transmission. So I don't know. I'm not sure these 2 things are going to line up. You've got some of the things like he's looking at include, and he also would like a manual transmission, fun to drive, and cargo space. So my thoughts have been all over the place, he admits. Fair enough. I get it. It's tough to buy a new car. It's tough to make these things line up. Willing to sacrifice the manual transmission to go with something like a Ford Maverick or an electric car like a Bolt EUV, Mazda 5 with a manual. I forgot about that. I actually remember driving that. Or go with something like an Elantra N or an Accord Sport, which you could put everybody in there. It's going to be tight. And there are decent sized trunks in, say, the Accord. I don't know if you can get 3 coolers in it, but it's a good sized cooler. Keep the price around 30 grand-ish with a little room. So that's it. So Matthew, first of all, thanks for writing. Thanks for listening. Like you said, Byron, this is a doozy. Yeah. So I guess I'm not quite sure where to start. Couple thoughts. I would say my initial impressions are he named Maverick. So, I mean, it's still going to be a little tight to get everybody in that thing, but I think it's fun to drive. It's a truck. It comes with an interesting bed. You can get the hybrid. I mean, if you're looking for sort of like something that's kind of fun and pretty functional, that's a good place to start. The Venn diagram sort of kind of goes through all parts of it. So I think that's part of my answer, if you will. But what do you think, Byron?
I'm struggling with this one. Honestly, like my heart says you need an old German wagon. And by old, I mean, at this point, we're talking about probably like mid to late 2000s, because you can get a 5 Series, 530, 535. And they're honestly not that expensive. The problem is, I don't know that it solves the potential breakdown on the side of the road, everything goes sideways kind of issue, which, it's when you're talking about German vehicles that are too old to be purchased, certified pre-owned, and you're going to have to go through probably a third party to get a warranty or something like that. The advantages of it being a wagon and being more fun to drive start to kind of dwindle a little bit in that context. I don't know. I mean, this is tough, because if we're talking about something that's supposed to be fun enough to drive that it could have hypothetically maybe come with a manual transmission, but still offers this much practicality, is tricky. I mean, he mentioned the Mazda 5. I mean, if you're willing to go to something like that, I mean, why not just go with the GTI or a Golf R? You could get a used either one of those for a fairly reasonable amount. And sure, you don't get sliding doors, but I mean, the Mazda 5 was just a Mazda 3 with sliding doors and a taller rear hatch area to accommodate the third row, if you actually want to be generous enough to call it that. Of course, you're getting no cargo space if you're using the third row, so it's still effectively a 2-row. And I don't even know if there's enough cargo space in the Mazda 5 with third row folded, not deployed, however you want to call it, to suit their needs in this situation. So you're probably better off not bothering with something that tries to have an auxiliary third row. This is tough. I like, for me, I would love the BMW wagon, even a 3 Series wagon, since obviously you can go compact if he's considering cars, Mazda 5 size. But I'm struggling with this one. I don't know that there's any one answer to this.
I don't think there necessarily is a one answer. I think to sort of augment what I said earlier, you could look for like maybe a used Volvo wagon. I'm seeing on Kelley Blue Book, there's a used V60 with the T5. That seems to be shockingly low. There's a listing for $23,500. Again, the V60 is going to be a little on the small side. You might want to look at the cross country even or something. So, I mean, there's like, it's a little bit different than, say, a German wagon, but it's sort of the same mission, if you will. So I would maybe look at a fun Volvo or something that might, keep you interested for a while. Stepping up to like a V90, you're going to get above north of 30. Like here's a 2017 one for about 38. That could be kind of fun. It looks like you're here's a 2018 cross country with 61,000 miles for 32. So it's doable. I mean, I would say depending on where you want it to like sort of what the experience to be, how you want to spend your 30 grand, like a wagon could also be fun-ish. And like a Volvo wagon, those are great looking cars, So I would say check out a V90, maybe cross country. That could be interesting. A used one, 3, 4, 5 years old. So that and a Maverick. And then if you can find a good older German wagon, definitely could work as well.
And I'll throw in too, thinking about less enthusiast wagons, but still wagons, Buick Regal Tourex.
Yes.
It exists.
Yeah.
And of course, no manual, but I mean, a decent automatic works just fine. And I mean, it's an Opel Insignia overseas, so it's not like it isn't European. It's just not as European as a BMW or Mercedes.
Yeah,
or Volvo.
No, that's true. I mean, it's an Opel, so underneath genetically. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely one of those parts of life where, like, what you desire, what you believe, and then what you got to do don't exactly line up, to paraphrase, I believe that's a saint, how your philosophy on car buying. It's a tricky part. Everything doesn't quite line up here. So let us know where you land. This will be an interesting one. Let's put it that way. It also is interesting. By the time this drops, it will be officially fall. What beer are you going to crack open this weekend with your weekend football? You did see the Washington football team, the Commanders, I guess, did lose to the Lions.
They did.
I believe me, there's no gloating on this part. The Lions may not win another game, but we did look pretty good. So, what are you drinking to soothe the pain of losing to the Lions?
I'm a simple guy when it comes to this stuff. Give me just a Sam Adams Oktoberfest, and I'm feeling pretty good. But I mean, honestly, any of the local brew Oktoberfest will work for me too. I've had Bell's a few times, and I want to say I've had a Shorts Oktoberfest maybe, and a couple others. I'll never turn down a decent, even halfway decent Märzen of some kind. So send any one of those my way, and I'm happy. What about you?
I like the Shorts Autumn Ale. I have liked this for, going on 10 years at this point. It's just a very well-rounded beer. It has, let me see if I can see the IBU rating. I can't find it, but it's a good one. ABV is 575, so it's got a bit of a hit. It's bitter-ish, but still fairly smooth. I like it. Check it out if you go to like Beer Advocate. They have a pretty good, write-up of what this is. Apparently there's a Shorts IPA, autumn IPA, which I did not know about until this very moment. I would be interested in trying that. Pumpkin beers, like those as well. I've been off of them for a few years because honestly, they give me a headache a little bit. They're a little too sweet. They're a little too, sometimes the ABV gets up there pretty quickly too. There was like a jaw jacker one. I forget who makes it. It's got like a pumpkin with like sharp teeth on it. But fall's going to be around for a while. You're going to hear a lot from me this fall about Bell's Amber Ale.
I do love Bell's Amber. That's kind of my go-to around here. If I'm at a restaurant, they pretty much guaranteed that they'll have at least a couple Bells, and usually they'll consider that one because it's not technically a seasonal. I believe that's one of their year rounds. So usually you can find it just about anywhere, just about any time, which is nice. But it's reliable, which I appreciate.
It's great on tap. It has a nice caramely body. It's foamy. I highly recommend it. But yeah, it's good all year round too. So if you enjoyed the podcast, if you have a fall beer you'd like to recommend, please drop in the comments, tweet at us, send them to us, podcast@autoblog.com, or send us your Spend My Monies. We'd love to spend your money. Matthew in Arizona, let us know what you're thinking of doing. And also, everybody, please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.